Hello YouTube, it's me, your boy, and I know I haven't posted or streamed a video in months. I have no excuses for that. No, really, I don't have an actual excuse as to why I haven't pumped out content recently. My motivation just for doing anything is set at an all-time low, and I kinda got sucked into this open world RPG game that by this point everyone and their grandmother would have already known about. Yes, I'm talking about the game Genshin Impact. There was just something about it that attracted me to the game, and before I knew it, I was already playing. I'm playing. Wait, why is everyone going to the Reds? Let's fast forward a bit, yeah? So now we're in this point, and Genshin's anniversary event is about to come out in a few days, along with the plethora of announcements for the upcoming anniversary awards and game events, which I'm not going to go into because I don't want the drama. Alongside those, this video came out.
Was you?
And the amount of nostalgia just hit me harder than my mother did with her slippers. It was in that moment that made me realize that I have spent a good full year playing Genshin Impact since its release. It made me reminisce of a better time when I was just a noob in Genshin and the game's meta was being sorted out. I was trying a whole bunch of team combinations and combos with the character without caring about what elemental reaction I could make. And it was during that time that I also remember finding my first boss in Genshin, which I stumbled into by mistake. I was exploring the far east of Mondstadt when I fell into a hole and came across this huge ass mud-fucking flower that looked like it had been raised by the Lich King himself. Needless to say, I died. Really fast with my level 20 characters. So now that got me thinking, you know what? I should play the game again. Inuzuma's storyline was such a shit show. But surely the Mondstadt and Liyue storyline couldn't have been that bad, right? So I played my brother's account that he had stopped using since he got Klee. I played through all the Archon quests over again and it was just as bad. Before we proceed, spoilers ahead, but you should have already known this when you saw the title for this video. I'll admit, maybe it was not as bad as the character assassinations committed to Kokomi and Goro, but it was still bad in my opinion. The pacing was random and inconsistent at times, and there were so many missed opportunities that other Mondstadt and Liyue characters can come in for to join the main storyline of the game. I'm not saying miHoYo should have dumped every single character into the main story just for a quick cameo, but I'm saying that miHoYo should have established these characters earlier rather than making them show up in random events, which they will try to connect to the overarching story of Genshin. This habit of theirs is making events is so jarring to me because the transitions between the main plot points of the story just gets muddier and more conflicting, as newer players that would completely miss these events would have no idea about the backstory of certain characters. For example, the character of Scaramouche was introduced way back in Fischl and Mona's event in the Unreconciled Stars, and he barely showed up until Inazuma. So it was kind of weird to just introduce him in the middle of the Raiden Archon Quest Part 2, where the Traveler is already preparing to fight against the Raiden Shogun. His appearance there didn't make sense because he didn't even become a major boss that we had to fight, and it was Signora who ended up taking that role, the main villainess for the Fatui. So he was just kinda there for appearance sake because he was connected to the Raiden Shogun and that's it. If you replace Scaramouche with Signora in his scene in the Inazuma storyline, there would be very little difference that would happen, and in fact, it would even make Signora's character in the storyline more prominent because we get indicated and we have a better idea that it was actually Signora who's the main villain here, and instead of the whole entire Fatui thing. I will get into this point more on a future video when I cover Inazuma, so stay tuned for that. So with that amount of disappointment I felt while playing through not only Inazuma but also both Mondstadt and Liyue Archon quests, the disappointment got channeled into my desire to make a video essay about it, and that's what I'm doing right now. I want to share my opinion with the community and discover if you guys also think the same way as I do. I swear I'm not trying to copy any YouTuber who does the same thing in the almost exact same format. You're just imagining things. But at the same time, I have been really inspired by a certain YouTuber who you should totally watch, by the way. His videos are really cool and detailed and very informative, and the way he structured the stories are just so compelling that it's amazing how he isn't a writer yet. Or he probably is. I'll probably buy his book when it's come out. Anyway, let's not derail from the topic any further. For the next few videos, I will be trying to retell, recap, and cover the stories of Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, and whatever story quests in between that I do think should be part of the canon of the overarching story. Like, we will be reunited questline for the twins. I don't know if that's the title of that particular questline, but I like to think it is. So, also, I forgot to mention this, I will refer to the traveler as they instead of us, he or she, because Ada and Lumine are characters of their own right and have their own personalities that is overshadowed by the self-insert nature of Genshin Impact storytelling. They actually have so much charisma and personality in them that it'd be a shame if we just make them into self-insert characters that players can get into. So, without further ado, we will now start a quick recap of Genshin Impact's Prologue, the Outlander who caught the wind, and my opinion over how some of these parts simply doesn't work. The story of Genshin Impact begins with Paimon narrating about the events that happened to the traveler before they got stranded into the world of Tevat. Paimon retells their encounter with the unknown god, how they got forcibly taken away from their twin, and how they were pretty much sent into a cryo chamber to wake up after a few hundred years into the future. Now that the traveler is awake, they wish to find out about what happened to their twin and the events that passed for the past 100 years. The story continues to Paimon swearing a note to be our eternal tour guide until the traveler finds their sibling. She then guides them towards the nearest statue of the Seven, where she explains that while the animal god isn't probably the god that the traveler is seeking, he or she was a good person to start with. It was here where the traveler discovers that they can just simply touch the statue to gain the power of the elements. This event eventually gives the idea to both Paimon and the traveler to travel all over Tevat and interact with each statue of the Seven to potentially gain favors from the gods, or at least grant them an audience with each one. Obviously, we see the traveler make use of this fully in the fights against Child and Signora, but we'll get to those eventually. Now fully equipped with the best emergency ration in the world and the power to blow winds on people's and Hilichurl's faces, the traveler heads off to Mondstadt for the chance to meet the animal god. And then this happened.
Who's there?
Anyway, we move on to Amber dealing with a few Hilichurls, and we finally get introduced to the city of Mondstadt. We are given these beautiful money shots of the city of Mondstadt, and we are illegally taught by Amber how to glide. Then, it is immediately followed up by this. We are barely given any time to enjoy the city and what it had to offer before Dvalin decided to show up and throw a bunch of winds into the city. Thankfully, our traveler, with the help of Venti, is able to drive the dragon away before it could do any more harm. Afterwards, we get congratulated by Kaya and fretted over by Amber. Moving on, we cut to the scene between Lisa and Jean talking about the Storm Terror crisis and planning on how to deal with him. Kaya brings Amber and the Traveler along to introduce the future hero of Mondstadt to the acting Grandmaster Jean for plot purposes. A few words are exchanged and the Traveler goes on an adventure to investigate these Temples of the Four Winds, where they believe that Dvalin is using something inside of them to keep up the wind barrier that's currently engulfing the city of Mondstadt. The Traveler and his group continues to clear the temples from Dvalin's weird eggs, and it's discovered there that the Abyss Order is semi-behind the situation concerning Dvalin. We also discover that the Fatui are trying to sneak into Jean's DMs to do Fatui stuff and ruin Mondstadt from the inside, just like how they plan to do in Liyue in Inazuma. Except, this time, Jean actually had the balls to say no to the Fatui and doesn't A. make a stupid contract with them, and B. doesn't let herself be manipulated by their underlings. Other than Zhongli, Jean actually communicates with the Fatui directly and wisely knows not to make any dealings with them. With the Fatui dealt with for now, the Traveler shows the red teardrop from Dvalin to Lisa and Jean. Then, they get promoted to Honorary Knight of Favonius. It is here when the Traveler pulls a pro-gamer move of staying quiet about the green guy and choosing to follow his gut. He eventually finds Venti playing a song for his fans, and we get introduced into another lore dump about Dvalin. It is revealed here when Dvalin protected Mondstadt, but the people were fearful of him to the point of expelling him from the city. After the lore dump, the Traveler, Paimon, and Venti discover that the Traveler can actually purify the teardrops from Dvalin's eye. Using this knowledge, Venti takes advantage of the Traveler by citing his earlier attempt of interaction with Dvalin, where he got poisoned by the impurities in the dragon's body. We go through an entire sneaking section after Venti and Traveler failed to convince the nun in the cathedral. So, the Traveler goes off to steal it instead, like a normal person. Sadly, a Fatui Chichen Mage, whatever, was there to steal the Holy Lyre and was able to run off with it. It placed the Traveler in danger, but admittedly it really wasn't much. Robin already had a backup hiding place in Venti already had a backup hiding place in Dilek's tavern. In that tavern, the Traveler meets Dilek and gets acquainted with each other. After a bit of convincing, Venti manages to enlist Dilek Wayne to helping us out, and Dilek calls on people like Barbara Jean Gord. Just Jean. Dilek manages to call up for Jean, yes, and to help with their little plan of purifying Dvalin. Jean eventually shows up, and she was able to have a rough idea of where the Fatui might be keeping the Holy Lyre. And after that, all of them just headed off straight to the secret base. They steamrolled through the base, and they were able to recover the Holy Lyre. Skipping forward a bit, after getting some materials for the lyre, the squad was able to get the Holy Lyre fully working again. They decided to use Storm Snatch Cliff as the primary location to lure out Dvalin, and they successfully did that. Except they failed anyway because the Abyss Order had already gotten to Dvalin first. The Holy Lyre sadly broke, and so did a little bit of the team's morale. It was after this scene when Genshin made the weirdest and most out of nowhere reveal, but also something I did find epic. After the failure of purifying Dvalin, the game cuts out to a scene that shows the Traveler's twin, and it's revealed there that twin is actually the leader of the Abyss Order. Sadly, I did find it quite sudden, and this scene would have made more sense in afterwards, you know? Anyway, the gang eventually reconvenes on Dilek's Manor where they discuss their next move. It was here when Venti discloses to the group that he felt something when they defeated the Abyss Mage. Through this, he was able to determine how to break through the barrier at Storm Terror's lair and confront Dvalin once and for all. With one last hurrah and a Lord of Rings Fellowship of the Ring moment, the group pretty much runs off to finish the fight once and for all. After a long series of battles, puzzles, and unsealing a light actuator, it now fell on the Traveler's lap again to deal with the actual fighting. Replicating the early confrontation with Dvalin, Traveler flew and got rid of the poison blood clots on Dvalin's back with the aid of Venti's wind abilities. After getting rid of two, the Traveler was able to weaken Dvalin enough to force a direct confrontation, leading our four heroes to lead the charge in the hopes of defeating and saving Dvalin. However, beating Dvalin came at a cost. The already very unstable platforms that the heroes had been standing on collapsed as soon as the last blood clot on Dvalin's back had been removed. The heroes seemed to fall into their untimely demise. Before Dvalin pulled out a page from How to Train Your Dragon's Toothless book and saved everyone by flying them on his back while they were falling. Yeah. And after a brief dragon ride, where Dvalin and Venti had their talk, reaffirmed their relationship with each other, the scene fades to black. And we time skip to the next day. The next day, basically we discovered that while the group was out fighting Dvalin, the Abyss Order and the other Hilichurls tried attacking Mondstadt while that happened. It was there where we discovered that Amber was in the middle of helping clean up the place, and the town was in the middle of reorganizing themselves from both the Storm Terror attack and the Abyss Order attack. It was also in this day where we get the famous and the infamous
This is a gnosis. Wouldn't be caught dead wearing this ugly thing in public. Beauty is a waste when the beholder has no taste.
Finally, we come to a quiet close for this arc and quest, as Venti discloses the secrets of the visions and how essentially all vision bearers are demigods. He also warns the traveler about the Fatui Harbingers and instructs us to head towards Liyue, where an equally troubling and complicated storyline awaits. Now, I have many things I once said for this storyline. Usually, when a monster shows up in the opening, that's the endgame monster that you'll eventually have to fight and finish the story of the game afterwards. That's the trope for RPG games like this. Monster Hunter does this trope very often, from the Nargacuga in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite to the Zora Magdaros in Monster Hunter World, and they do so for a reason. A huge monster or dragon showed in an opening like this usually has huge plot impact that not only affects that specific region, but also the entire world. Another example for this again is from the anime Tensura. Veldora there shows up as the first huge monster or dragon that we see alongside Rimuru, and from there we also discover that Veldora was actually a huge figure in not only the history of Tensura, but also its major powers. And that simply just doesn't work in Genshin, specifically between Dvalin and Venti. I will admit though, when I first saw Dvalin, I was very hyped. But now that I came back to the game after going through Inazuma, I couldn't help but feel disappointed? I'm not certain about the word to use for what I felt when I saw Dvalin again, but it bordered between disappointment and exasperation. For me, to show Dvalin this early simply doesn't work. We are instead shown a seemingly domestic dragon who interacts with a random bard in the woods before fleeing when it detects the traveler. It really lowers his overall threat level especially when he decides to cover the entire city of Mondstadt in harsh winds later on. It was more like he just showed up there to make some trouble instead of being this huge impactful villain that we know him as before the whole, oh, he's actually poisoned, he's actually good, we need to purify him. And compare this to, let's say, the appearance of Osial in the story of Liyue. Between the two, Osial, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, sorry. That god had lesser screen time, but his threat level was bigger, more significant than Dvalin because we know very little about him. We just know that it's a huge water god Leviathan thing that has a lot of heads, and yeah, that's it. That's all we know about him. So for the people or players who paid more attention to the story, we can eventually find out that it's an evil god sealed away by Zhongli, which is not really spoon-fed to us a lot in the dialogue. It's more just said in passing. We didn't even realize that Osial was going to be the major god or major enemy in this term, because we just simply thought that the enemy was going to be Child. And that's how better Osial is compared to Dvalin, because Osial's sudden appearance brought more pressure and threat and atmosphere than Dvalin's appearance in the story. Especially since we started off with Dvalin being looking a domesticated cat or dog in front of Venti. I will understand though that many people will not agree with this opinion. I can also see the merit of introducing Dvalin this early on and showing his peaceful side so the player can be cued that there is something else at work. The scene between Venti in the valley can be used as a form of red herring as well, that Venti might be planning something villainous and Dvalin his dragon pet to wreak havoc on Mondstadt. This is, for me, what I felt like what MiHoYo was trying to do, because Venti disappeared in a very menacing manner with a scowl towards the traveler and he just disappears without a word. And after that, Dvalin attacked the city of Mondstadt. So maybe some players would think, okay, Venti and Dvalin are the main villains for this. And apparently no. They're both good guys. It can also just happen that that was actually the only chance Venti had to talk with Dvalin and the travelers simply screwed that up. But still, these ideas don't work, especially when the scene is immediately followed by a cheerful Amber meeting the traveler. Her introduction and meeting the traveler into the story just really ruined the impact for Dvalin and Venti, because the lack of her sense of urgency, despite the fact that a huge dragon came out of the forest that she was also in because she ran from the forest, really undermines the prior scene between Venti and Dvalin. It's like Dvalin wasn't even a threat at that point, because surely Amber should have seen Dvalin leave the forest. But apparently she didn't, and she just saw the traveler in Paimon first, which really doesn't make sense if you think about it, and because of that, Dvalin just doesn't exist anymore. Then there was Dvalin's second appearance into the story, wherein he kind of covered the entirety of Mondstadt in winds. Once again, I find issue with Dvalin showing up this early and trying to wreck the city before we were even given the chance to settle into the land of Teyvat. I definitely would have found it better if the traveler was given the chance to explore the town a bit more, and maybe even meet a few of the playable Mondstadt characters in the same way that we meet Kaya and Amber in the story. Maybe while walking a street, we come across Noelle, and she's doing a side quest. Or we maybe catch a glimpse of Bennett and Fischl in front of Catherine, embarking on the commission from the guild or try to sneak off. We may even spot Diona coming home or going back to the bar after visiting the Angel's Share, where she tried to, sabotage the business. There were so many missed opportunities in this opening act to introduce these characters, rather than just leave them on the side for a hangout event instead. I would have been fine as well if they showed up as just brief cameos in the background instead, like maybe Noelle just lifting a few boxes in the back, Bennett tripping over, or Fischl just on her way out the gate. Their small appearances, while very minor details, can at least help establish where they were when Storm Terror attacked, and what they could have possibly been doing at that time, because we didn't also have any kind of dialogue among the characters with the Storm Terror of the other Mondstadt characters. despite the fact of, you know, they're Mondstadt characters. They should have known what was happening. Okay, you can make the excuse that Fischl and Bennett was outside doing the commissions, but what about Noelle? Noelle is literally inside Mondstadt 24/7 as a maid. She's just helping people cleaning things, so it didn't make sense that Noelle didn't do anything during the Storm Tower crisis, was barely mentioned in the story, and she wasn't even noticed around the cutscenes as well, when her literal motivation is become a Knight of Favonius, and her way of doing that is helping people around her. So instead of meeting these potentially better characters that the Traveler can interact with, we meet the high-ranking captains in the Knights of Favonius, like Kaeya, Lisa, Amber, and Jean. We meet them first before, you know, the actual normal characters. Okay, I may be nitpicking at this point, but I definitely would have appreciated this level of detail more. Not to mention, it has been established in earlier cutscenes that it has been a while or long time since the Traveler had human companionship. Panion had been his only companion, his or her only companion for 2 months, but interacting with her would have been different from interacting with the other NPCs. I would have personally loved to see the Traveler's character growth from an awkward speaker, as he only had Paimon as a companion and they banter all the time, which may come across as annoying or maybe arrogant to some NPCs, and he grows from that to a more confident speaker as the arc and quest went on. Finally, there was the questline where the Traveler is tasked to go around Mondstadt in the various temples to deal with the weird Devalin eggs that is keeping the capital city caged inside. Again, it's another missed opportunity for MiHoYo to introduce Mondstadt-related characters in this situation, specifically Bennett and Fischl. These two could have been better, even greater companions than Amber when they investigated these domains, especially when these two most likely have more experience in adventuring than the actual Knights of Favonius. While the danger may deter John from enlisting their help, she obviously had no problems having Amber accompany the Traveler to the temples, despite knowing how Amber can be a klutz at times. It may simply be due to their past relationship, because in the comics it was already shown that Jean at least acknowledges Amber's capabilities, but turning away the help of two experienced, albeit one unlucky, adventurers wouldn't be ideal in this situation. Noelle can even volunteer to help, and given the fact that everyone literally knows that Noelle has been gunning to be a knight in the Knights of Favonius, Jean could have given this chance to prove herself and finally be a knight. Instead, we got a hangout event with Noelle, and we get zero to no reference to Noelle, Fischl, or Bennett in any of the game's major cutscenes. Most of my problems really comes down to the lack of use of some of the already existing Mondstadt characters that definitely would have brought more flavor to the storyline. This is actually something that MiHoYo tried to address in Inazuma, where they tried to give each Inazuman character a chance to shine in the spotlight in the main arc and quests. The problem was they really failed on the execution of some of the characters, namely Kazuha, Beidou, Goro, and Kokomi. However, that is a problem for another video. Now, with all my pieces and criticisms said and done, let's now embark on how I think the prologue of Genshin Impact should have proceeded. The game starts off the same way as the original, with very little differences. Paimon is still the one narrating the events before the prologue, with the only key difference of having additional scenes of the Traveler living their life before they met Paimon. Afterwards, the game proceeds as normal, and after reaching the statue, the Traveler now discovers that they have the power of Animal. The events after this are where the deviations from the original plot starts. Instead of spotting Devalin directly above them and seeing him in the cutscene with Venti in the forest, the Traveler simply spots Devalin in the far distance as a small speck of blue. He will be flying over some of the mountains and moving towards his lair. As soon as the Traveler points this out, Paimon will comment about it, saying she doesn't recognize that thing. This gets her a little worried, because even though she prided herself to knowing most of Teyvat, she didn't know exactly what the Traveler had pointed out. The both of them continue into the forest, where they are stopped and greeted by Amber. From here, the game plays out like it did in the original, with the only key difference in how Mondstadt is introduced. Instead of a bunch of hovering shots of the city and random scenes of the NPC as a cutscene, we enter what cinematographers would say a one-take shot of Amber, Paimon, and the Traveler walking towards the city. From just by the bridge, the Traveler would be able to see the scarce few NPCs who are out despite the storm terror threat, and they become excited at the prospect of meeting other people. As they approach the gate, it is here where our first playable Mondstadt character shows up. Bennett would turn around the corner and accidentally crash into the Traveler. He would quickly apologize for the act, saying that he was in a rush because he just got a commission that looked promising. He would promise to treat the Traveler next time they meet, as he gets reprimanded by Amber for not being careful enough. The Traveler easily forgives him with a smile, and Bennett had to reluctantly run off with a wave because he would be wasting daylight for adventure. The three of them would then continue to walk into town. During this part, the Traveler would turn their head around to look in wonder, much like how they did in version 1.3 All That Glitters trailer, when their Lantern Rite festival was in full swing. In each turn they would make, they would spot some of the well-known NPCs like Catherine and some of the playable ones. They can see Noel helping out Wagner, the Mondstadt smith, by carrying a few boxes on his smithery and placing them to where he wants them to be. As Amber introduces the Traveler to the town and all the sights, she first directs him to the Adventurer's Guild. Here we see Fischl standing just beside Catherine, going over some of the details of a commission. We would overhear Catherine talking about the storm terror threat, and that Fischl is chosen as one of the adventurers who will be out to investigate a sighting of Dvalin. This is also how Catherine notices the Traveler, which can be used to tie in later when she ropes him and her into joining the Adventurers Guild. Amber can then proceed to the town square, where she would happily smile at the Traveler as she formally welcomes him to Mondstadt. On the background, we will be able to see Sucrose by the alchemy shop, quietly reading a book to herself, and possibly even Leona, who is angrily walking on her way back from Angel's Share. From here, the cutscene ends and the player will get to play again. Just like usual, Amber teaches the player the ropes on how to use the wing glider, but no Dvalin attack happens yet. Eventually, Amber will have to get called for her duties as the Outrider, and the Traveler is left alone with Paimon in Mondstadt. From here, they can explore the city, and this is where the small series of side quests start to crop up. As we explore the main city of Mondstadt, talking to NPCs and whatnot, we discover Noel, who seemed to be struggling in the middle of a job. The Traveler walks over to ask what she was doing and offers to help, saying he had nothing to do at the moment. Noel at first tries to refuse the offer because she didn't want to involve a citizen to her chores as a maid, but eventually finds the job to be too difficult for her. She reluctantly agrees to the Traveler's offer of helping her, and the two try to go around and the side quest starts. Much like how we met Goro in passing in the Inazuma storyline, Noel gets enough screen time for the player base to know her willingness to help people, and her desire to become a Knight of Favonius. The Traveler encourages her in her endeavors before bidding farewell as they walk around Mondstadt for a bit more. Keeping up the pace of slowly meeting characters, we then move to meet Fischl, who is currently buying supplies for her commission. The Traveler and Paimon greets her because Paimon was curious about the Electro Raven flying beside her. The two engage in small talk, and Fischl likes the Traveler enough to permit them to travel with her. This is where we start to divulge a little more back to the main storyline, as also relates to the Traveler about the life in Mondstadt and how much Dvalin has been affecting the lives in the city. This gives us more information to seek out Dvalin, as well as getting enough information to know enough about him, but still not enough to know how strong he is. In their brief adventure to the wild in search of traces for Dvalin, both of them agree to split up so they can cover more ground. From here, the Traveler comes across Dvalin and Venti in the forest, and the cutscene plays out as how it did in the original, with the sole exception of Fischl and Noz showing up after seeing Dvalin fly off from the forest. By this point, the Traveler would have already recovered the teardrop and hidden it in his possession, so that the later parts of the game play out as it did in the original. The traveler tells Fischl of his findings, but kept Venti's involvement as a secret. Fischl takes note of this, and she narrows her eyes in suspicion. This allows to cement her role as the investigator of the Adventurers Guild, as she tries to pry into the traveler with not much luck. She eventually just gives up after seeing that the traveler simply wouldn't budge, although she notes she'll find out what they were hiding eventually. This way we can play the red herring with Venti a little bit more and the traveler's hiding his identity having an outcome than how it had been portrayed in the story. Because it was rather weird that the traveler simply got away with hiding Venti's involvement with Dvalin until Deluxe Tavern scene. No. The four then head back to report their findings to the Adventurers Guild, but were stopped on the way when they saw Bennett pass out on the road back to Mondstadt. They quickly check on him to discover that he was only suffering from stomachache from the food he had eaten. This is a subtle nod to his later hangout event and also quickly establishes his character as being either careless or unlucky. To bank on this a bit further, as the five of them enter the city, Dvalin finally attacks Mondstadt and covers the city and wins. By delaying the scene a little further, we get to experience a bigger impact on just how dire the situation becomes in Mondstadt. Fischl and Bennett quickly run towards the town to try and help the people, and Trevor looks around in a panic. He would see Noelle helping the children get to safety, using her body to defend against the flying debris, which is a nod in one of Mondstadt's world quests, about how Dvalin's wind had scattered signs and papers all over the place, and maybe even spotting Leona, who is trying to protect the kittens from the winds. Finally, the traveler would spot Amber, who is coordinating with Sucrose to help the people who have been stuck on the town square. This at least helps to establish what these background characters have been doing during the Storm Terror attack, as the rest of the sequence plays out as how it did in the original. Venti comes in clutch and basically blesses the traveler with wind powers to drive out Dvalin. After the short battle with Dvalin, the rest of the scene happens almost exactly the same as the original. Kaya congratulates us, Amber frets over us, and we move to the Knights of Favonia's headquarters. However, during the meeting, a knight interrupts the small council and informs them about a trio asking about the traveler's whereabouts. It is here when the traveler realizes that these three can help them in their attempt to save Mondstadt, and immediately suggests the idea to Jean. At first, Jean is against the idea because this was solely a Knights of Favonia's matter, but the traveler insists on the idea. Amber backs him up in this instance as she had realized just who the traveler was referring to. In a surprise bid, Kaya also tosses the coins in the traveler's favor, as he had also witnessed the daring and heroic acts that Noelle, Bennett, Fischl, and Sucrose had done during the panic. Saying that two of her officers were with the idea, Jean still seemed trouble with the idea until Lisa gave her a compromise. The three citizens can come with them as a helper if, and only if, one of the knights are also to come along. This setup made more sense to the previous quest, wherein one of the Knights of Favonius were just standing outside the doorway, as if they had been there the entire time. Jean finally gives in, under the condition that these citizens are to be protected and monitored so nothing comes to them. The quest ends same as the original, except we have more extra characters and we may end up having interesting combinations and conversations. For example, maybe Noelle and Amber, or Bennett and Lisa, or Fischl and Kaya. Sucrose sadly won't join us in the entire questline because she will be busy fixing the alchemist shop on behalf of Albedo's absence, and because she is a main character in Dragonspine. Upon fixing the problem and freeing Mondstadt from its windy cage, the group goes back to the city to plan their next move. From here, we once again bid farewell to our groups, and this is when Noelle and Bennett completely depart from the main story. Noelle will excuse herself from the group as she will volunteer her services to fixing the buildings that have been damaged from the attack. Bennett will be taking this time to recover after an unfortunate accident in the temples, which serves as a build-up for his hangout event. This only leaves Fischl as the other Mondstadt member, and she was still suspicious about the traveler. This is only hinted by Fischl pretending to depart as well to rest, while snidely glancing at the traveler from side to show that wasn't truly the case. Paimon nor the Traveler notices this as they meet up with Jean talking with the Fatui, before divulging the Devalin's corrupted tear to Lisa and Jean. The meetup with Venti happens the same as the original with one key difference. The Traveler and Paimon finally notices that Fischl was tailing them and they have to avoid her. This starts a stealth sequence that makes more sense than the stealing the Holy Liar section and may even act as a precursor for that moment. The Traveler has to avoid Fischl and Oz through the town while on their way to meet Venti by his statue. The whole sequence plays out as it did in the original once they do meet, and the only change that will be made here is that Fischl and Oz gets dragged along Venti, Traveler, and Paimon as they run back to Angel's Share. Fischl tries to get in the way during the escape, of course, but with 3 people dragging her along, she can't really do anything. Here we have an alternate discussion of what to do next, as Venti finally divulges the secrets to Devalin's corruption to Diluc, Fischl, and Oz. Fischl was baffled enough by the news that she actually breaks character, which reveals the Amy side of Fischl. This gives us a better idea of who Fischl really is, and Oz is the one who has to take over in doing the long and complicated talk. During this relatively serious discussion, the group agreed that some investigations should be done. Fischl volunteers her services to do some scouting for the group and agreed that telling this secret to the public would be a disaster. The 3 of them agreed that if they did, then the adventurers would try to march straight up to Devalin in an attempt to calm down the legendary Wind Beast. On that note, the group disperses temporarily, and Fischl promising to look into the leads of where the Fatui may have taken the Holy Liar. This is where Jean comes in, and Fischl helps to confirm her rough idea of the Fatui hiding spot. At least this event makes it more believable that Jean has reliable information about the Fatui's hiding place, and they didn't just find it out of luck. After this event, Fischl departs from the main storyline as she's also discovered some disturbing leads about a heliotrope force gathering just outside of Mondstadt. The guild has called for her to do some recon for them, and she bids the group good luck and adieu. At least this way it builds up the random attack that the Heliotropes and Abyss Order did against Mondstadt when Jean left, and the reason why the Mondstadt Knights were very well prepared despite the absence of the Grand Master and Diluc. Now for the rest of the story, it shall be told the same way as it had been in the original. The group goes through the hideout, breaks the Holy Liar, clear the barrier and storm terrors there, and finally releasing Devalin. It's only the day after do things change again, but only the most minor of details. Alongside Amber, Noel will be seen cleaning up the mess that the Heliotropes made outside of Mondstadt with some Knights of Favonius. It can be seen that the Knights are congratulating her and telling her that she will become a great knight one day, which lifts up her spirits. This coincidentally helps to set up her hangout event where she seeks the Traveler for help after learning of his achievements during the Storm Terror threat. As Amber once again leads Traveler to the town, we see the other familiar faces. Bennett will be in the middle of taking a commission from Catherine, while Fischl can be seen walking towards the building, most likely her home in Mondstadt. The story ends as how it did in the original, except this time, the unused characters of Mondstadt had their times to shine in a way that fit them to the storyline. I didn't add Sucrose, Albedo, and Rosaria to the main story of Mondstadt because they are the main cast in Dragonspine. While it is unfortunate that is the case, they are still part of Albedo's character quest, which is canon as long as I'm concerned. The same can be said for Clay and Eula, who already have their own character quest, and for Razor, who is likely to simply stay in Wovendom even during the events of Storm Terror. Regardless, I hope you liked my retelling of Genshin Impact's Prologue and enjoyed the ideas that I have put out. If you have any ideas to how this story can further improve, for example, really banking on the whole red herring Venti thing, then please put it in the comments, and if you do disagree with any of mine, please feel free to share them in the comments below as well. And for the next video, I am planning on doing Li Wei's storyline and do the same as I did in this one. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully I don't butcher any of the names. I might have to research on how most of those names are said. Anyway, Thank you for watching and have a great day.